We're back. So last episode, we were talking about betrayal and the internal constructs that happened uh, when we feel betrayed, and how it causes us to look inward on, Jen was talking about expectations. Um, but for me, it's more than just expectations, right? We literally build a construct around this person, place, or thing. Our brain does it for us without us realizing it, based on what we believe about that person, place, or thing, what we perceive about that person, place, or thing, and therefore what we expect from that person, place, or thing. So one of the things that we talk about in abundant living mapping is our perception of things are not always the full truth, right?
Yeah.
And actually, we will see what we expect to see, not really what is happening. And most people that aren't familiar with this training, they think that that's absolutely ludicrous until I prove it to them. And so we build constructs around our perception. When Dave was in law enforcement, he would share with me how totally bizarre it was that he could be at the scene of an accident or a crime with multiple witnesses, and all of the witnesses saw something completely different. Not a different vantage point.
Yeah.
Right? No, like one person would be like, well, it was a, white woman wearing a black t-shirt, and the other person would be like, no, it was a black man in a gray hoodie.
Wow.
And like super bizarre, because they were seeing what they expected to see, and then we actually fill in the blanks. Our brain is so busy creating connections, because those are constructs, that it tells our mind this is the story. So we have point A, the accident. So we see a vehicle crash into another vehicle, right? And our brain will immediately create a construct around that crash event, our expectation. Did you expect the little speed racer car to cause the accident? Or did you expect the big SUV that's a road hog to cause the accident?
Yeah.
It will completely shift what you believe about that accident and what you think that you saw, because your brain will fill in. Right.
Yeah.
And it will fill in the blank spots. Our brain does not like blank spots at all. So it fills it in. And so what you would tell the officer, about this great big road hog SUV, or this speed racer zipping through traffic, little sports car. And then let's say both people have gotten out of their vehicles, right? You are going to then, you already have a construct around a white woman, a black man, a oriental, whatever. And your brain starts creating, filling in the blanks. Anyway, so we go into that in abundant living mapping. It's really amazing, because it's part of understanding how we actually map out our own belief system and our history mapping. So super important. Anyway, so that's what our brain does all the time. So when we go into feeling like we've been betrayed by something, right? We immediately, our brain starts looking at our internal construct and pulling it apart, and it creates amazing instability within ourself. We will associate it with this experience out here, but we're actually in internal conflict with the construct that we have created. So that's kind of summing up last week and talking about betrayal. So this week, I wanted to really talk about what it takes to not just overcome betrayal, right? But take it to the place of actually having restoration of relationship with that person, place, or thing. Okay. And what has to happen typically, and I'm just for this scenario, I'm going to use scenarios that involve human beings. All right. You can be betrayed by an animal, right? Caused injury or whatever, all of a sudden acted out of character and bit you. And now you've got this, huge fear around animals, the bridge scenario that we talked about, all this other kind of stuff, right? And we can easily say, well, we can have restoration in that situation, have some therapy with dogs, start driving over other bridges. Eventually, we'll become inoculated and begin to trust the bridge again, etc. Maybe some PTSD therapy, whatever, right? But let's talk about with a human and that human interaction factor, that relationship factor. And in other times, we've talked about the difference between covenant relationships and transactional relationships, right? And this is one level of understanding relationship that's going to help you not be so betrayed, right? We can all be disappointed, and that's okay. But we don't want it to go to the level we're always feeling betrayed, right? And so when we set an expectation based on our internal construct that this relationship is covenantal versus transactional, we can easily be betrayed. Because if I believe I'm in covenant with you, and you go off and do something that is outside of what I perceive our covenant is, right? Then I can feel betrayed.
Yeah.
But if I know that our relationship is transactional, which is not a bad thing, you guys, transactional relationships should be the majority of relationships that are in your life. There's a give and take. That's all a transactional relation. There is a give and a take, right? You're getting something from me, I'm getting something from you. But once one of those people are no longer needing that thing from you, right? Then there's not a transaction happening.
Right.
And it's okay, right? So you may be, the greatest employee for your boss ever because you do the best bookkeeping under the sun. But if the corporation then starts using some, paychecks company, right? They no longer need a bookkeeper in the office.
Yeah.
But you feel like you are in covenant with this boss, right? You are going to feel deep betrayal.
Yeah.
Versus understanding I was fulfilling a bookkeeping need. So we were transactional. As long as I'm filling a need that they had and they're paying me and providing a great environment for me to do it in, it's a transaction, right? And as soon as one of those parties don't need it, or let's flip-flop it, same scenario, but the bookkeeper is like, I'm ready to retire.
Yeah.
Right? And the boss is like, you can't do that. We're in covenants. Like, you're supposed to be here forever. And you're like, yeah, no, this is not what I want to do forever, right? I want to go spend time with grandkids. I want to travel in my RV, whatever, right? So we have to have a greater understanding, first of all, of transactional and covenantal relationships. That's going to be the first level of protecting yourself from betrayal because it is actually creating a better construct.
Yeah.
Right? But let's say that there is that betrayal and there are various levels of bringing restoration to that situation. And all of them, right? We could just break away and go our separate ways. Absolutely. Right? And there is no restoration, there is no reconciliation, there's no whatever. It's just you've gone your separate ways. That's the lowest level of dealing with betrayal. But to be in any type of level towards maturity, it's going to require one thing that I think is the hardest thing for everybody to do. And that is brave communication.
Yeah.
Right? That you have to be able to enter into brave communication. And if you can't enter into brave communication, restoration cannot happen.
Right.
What was before and better can't happen. You might have a level of reconciliation, right? So when we reconcile an account, we're back to like zero, right? There's no surplus, there's no debt. We are reconciled, all things match up, we're at zero. So that person is back into your life at the level of maybe when you meet a stranger. There's no relational equity. You now know things about each other, right?
Yeah.
And there will probably be some level of guard, awareness, hesitation. Things have shifted. Like you're never going to be at ground zero of, I don't know anything about you.
Right.
Right. But for the most part, you're at reconciliation, that is that I forgive you. We're at ground zero. And sometimes you just move on from there. I would not say that that is a mature level of dealing with betrayal, but it's definitely better than zero communication and I'm taking my toys from the sandbox and never seeing you again, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about two things in brave conversations. One is after betrayal. The other one is having brave enough conversations to avoid betrayal. So to have a brave conversation in order to avoid betrayal will require you understanding really your core values and principles.
That's good.
And communicating them.
Yeah.
Right? Which not enough people understand what their core values and principles are. We talked last week about getting into a marriage, right? And people saying their vows and all that kind of stuff. I think it would be amazing to bring your core values and principles into your vows.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Right? And agreeing, one, not to betray your own core values and principles, which would be another conversation for another day. We'll get into that in our power couple teaching. You should never betray your own core values. And then you should never betray the core values of someone you're in covenant with. But you have to understand what they are. Right? So a true covenantal relationship is, these are my core values. These are my terms. These are my principles. This is at the very core of my being and who I am. Not only can I not betray that, because that actually creates like self-hatred and all other kinds of things, right? I need to know, what are your core values and principles? What's at the very core of your being, so that I can do my best to not violate them.
Yeah.
Right? in a covenant relationship. Now, this isn't about a transactional relationship. This is about being in a covenantal relationship and navigating those conversations. Because if it's like, hi, my name's Melissa. Nice to meet you. Let me talk to you about my core values and what will happen if you break them. You'd be like, peace out. Like, I'm out of here, right? That goes along with like oversharing and all that other kind of stuff, right? So,
Not my people.
yeah. Yeah. Deb Alexander, those are probably not my people. Anyway, so obviously, if you have a tendency to move into oversharing because you are so desperately wanting covenantal relationships, that's a whole different story. And we do get into that teaching in our leadership program. But let's say that you are actually moving towards a covenantal relationship with someone because you now have an understanding between covenant and transactional. You realize that you're moving into a covenantal relationship, and there should be intentional conversations around core values and principles. And I want to give you guys a lot of grace here because a lot of people have no idea what their core values are. They haven't even given them much thought. You're operating from them all the time, and you're actually in conflict with them a lot of times because you haven't intentionally explored what they are. So I think that as a relationship progresses, this is an ongoing and fluid conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, Jen, I just realized I have a core value of trying to think of something that, of getting work done on time. Yeah. Like when it doesn't happen, I feel betrayed, right? And she gets to ask questions. She's like, well, that's really interesting. So first of all, have I ever done anything to trigger that in you? Oh, no. I'm just, realizing that that's actually a core value of mine. And she can be like, okay, so what does that look like? Mm-hmm. Like if I was working on a project and it wasn't getting done on time, how would you feel if I came to you and I'm like, hey, Melissa, like, actually, I think I'm not going to get done on time. Is that okay with you? How could we work on this? Right? Well, then, yeah, I'd be like, oh yeah, that actually is super honoring to me because then I can reset my expectation about what on time is, right? Mm-hmm. But what if I never communicated what on time was?
Yeah. I wouldn't know what to expect.
Right. And you're just going about doing your thing, la, 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 la. And like showing up and being like, why does Melissa have her head up her butt today? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Not realizing that I'm all triggered over here because I expected that project to be done last week and it's still not done. Yeah. But this is what we do in relationships all the time.
Right.
But if we actually had brave conversations about our core values, our principles, right? Mm-hmm. What never to do to me type of a thing. Or what always to do, right? Whatever your core value and principle is. And that's exchanged between two people as that covenant is developed, right? Then I think there's a less likelihood of betrayal. Brave communication, in my opinion, is the number one factor in avoiding betrayal.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about our program and how we have so many different, the DISC and the COBE and different tests that show us, tell us about our qualities and everything that is important to us and our weaknesses and our strengths. And when we know that about ourselves and we share that with you and you know that about yourself, and then it helps keep us from having those false expectations or creating constructs around, oh, I think you're this way, but
Right.
because I'm this way.
Right.
So definitely powerful. And core values, of course, is part of that, and pillars. But
right, and so know thyself, right? But
yeah.
but then communicate
Communicate.
thyself to the other person, right? So that's in the beginning to avoid betrayal of the construct we have created around this person. Now, the more true information we have about that person, the actual better that construct is going to be, right? We talked about Jesus last week with Judas. He was God, for Pete's sake. So he knew what to expect from Judas. You know, it reminds me of way lower scale. And we're talking about the disc and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm a high D and can press into an I, right? I could act as a C if I needed to, and super detail oriented. The hardest thing for me to do would be an S. Well, then I'm around S's, and I'm waiting in the car for them to get in the car, or and they are so busy making sure everybody is feeling okay and let me connect with you. They're not even remotely thinking that Melissa is waiting in the car ready to pull out of the driveway because she's already halfway down the road in her mind and she's checking the time and we're feeling, they don't get down here, we're going to be running. And instead, I'm like, oh, they are such an S because I know what they're experiencing right now.
Not.
Anyway, S. Anyway, so, setting expectations, knowing yourself, knowing other people, so that our constructs that we are creating around them don't fail as much, right? And cause us to begin to dismantle those constructs. That's the root of betrayal. So brave communication from the very beginning. Now, on the flip side, betrayal has happened. Now, what does that brave conversation look like? Right? Like we said, we can take our toys and leave the sandbox and never see each other again. It's the lowest level of bringing healing, if you will, to betrayal. Then there is the, reconciliation. Okay, I forgive you. And we have no relational equity, but we're not in debt anymore. It's, some kind of equilibrium there. But we have more information in our construct about this person, place, or thing. But what if we want to actually move into restoration, to restore what was, right? And actually in the kingdom, what's so good is anytime we move into restoration, it's, the kingdom principle is it's better than it was. That is ultimate restoration.
Yeah.
So we could literally think about, our relationship being restored back to God. Right? None of us are naked running around in the Garden of Eden right now. Our relationship with God is even better than what Adam and Eve lost because we have Holy Spirit inside of us now, right? So, so many things that are so much better about the restoration. So how do we move into restoration with someone that has betrayed us is going to require the brave conversation around those core values, those principles, the experience of the betrayal, right?
Yeah.
And each person has to do two things. They have to own their part of it and express that to the person, right?
Yeah.
Because if somebody's not owning their peace, you can't have restoration. So they have to bravely communicate their level of commitment and ownership to their peace. They have to bravely communicate what their core value was, what that the construct was created around, right? And what they experienced when that construct became unstable.
Mm.
And then they have to be able to understand on the other side all of that same stuff that was going on with them.
Yeah.
Because both parties are typically having a similar experience in regards to instability in their internal construct. Unless you have one person with a covenantal expectation, the other person's in a transactional. Then it's always going to be the issue of the person that basically put more weight in the relationship than should have been, right? Because a transactional person, they're in a transaction. They have no idea they just betrayed you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it always weighs on the covenantal. So, but let's talk about two people in covenant, a marriage, a family, right? This happens in business partnerships, where there are agreements. So betrayal happens. If you want that relationship to be restored back to what it was and better, have to have brave conversations. And they're hard. They're hard.
Yeah.
Owning your peace, right, is hard. Extending to the other person the permission for them to express their pain is hard.
Yeah. And to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And own it.
Yeah.
Not deflect it, right? Own it.
Right. Yeah.
And so talking about betrayal, talking about brave conversation, you guys, I just think that it's so important as mature kingdom representatives to get a hold of this, because thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven requires human interaction.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, this is funny because I'm thinking of an instance where, based on what I shared the last episode about the administration betrayal.
The church thing. Oh yeah, with the pitchforks.
No.
Oh,
with
okay.
work.
Okay.
But as far as working, I feel like we had to step into that one day with brave conversation of, you did something or didn't do something. I don't even remember now, but I went into that construct of that prior, but I had to utilize the tools that we teach in abundantly in mapping and be like, okay, what is bringing on this thought that you would react or do or think a certain way? And I traced it back to that, and it was like, but that's not who you are. And so I knew, but then to have that conversation of, okay, you won't believe this, but
right. Well, it's so good you bring that up. So a fairly recent, me, you guys get ready for transparent again. So a fairly recent interaction, and Jen, whether she's even aware of it or not, that I went through, right, had to do with us and had to do with a situation where I was dealing with something less than enjoyable with family situation. We'll just say that. And I just want to be honoring of everybody that is, still possibly living, could be watching this broadcast. So, so stressful situation with family, and realizing that initially I was having almost this expectation of Jen to be coming in and nurturing this family part of me. And what Jen was doing was actually taking care of everything that I wasn't taking care of in the business, right? And making sure, because a core value I had expressed a long time ago was, I want to know that if I'm ever taken out, that the higher view doesn't miss a beat. That's a core value. That's a heart cry of mine. Always has been, because this isn't about me. And I always want to make sure that all of the women that we are called to serve, like, don't miss a meal.
Yeah.
Right? And so Jen was operating, like, she stepped in, making sure it's like she turned into, like, mama bear of THV and stepped in to make sure everything was getting taken care of. And of course, she also, to top it off, this is just how life happens, had 10 million things also coming up on her plate that week that she was having to do with her certifications and all this other kind of stuff that she was doing. So, but she stepped in wanting to fulfill a core value that had been expressed before. Right? And I had this internal struggle going on and go, Lord, why am I having this internal struggle? And we initially, right, start looking externally. Well, why is Jen not here holding my hand? Well, that's exaggerating. Okay. And the Lord's like, because Melissa, you expressed a core value to her that she took really seriously. And I had to pause. I was like, what did I do? Right? And he pointed out, he's like, she was being an answer to your prayer, because that's a core value that you expressed. And I was like, oh my gosh. So what happened, and this is all like in a matter of moments, you guys, it's not like some drawn out thing. In a matter of moments, I realized, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, I went from having my, feelers hurt or disappointed because, right, I'm experiencing a family construct dysfunction in the moment, not with Jen, with my family, right? And so I'm literally shifting external experiences to this construct I'm having on the inside. And having to realize that no, Jen is actually fulfilling a core value that you've expressed to her. And I went from having my feelings hurt to feeling insanely honored, to where that's what's actually made me cry in the moment. I actually had to walk into another room of where I was, because I was like, oh my freaking gosh. And so this is what I'm talking about, like restoration. Not that there was some dysfunction, but it literally upped the relationship to me, because I realized there was an honor for a core value that was expressed.
Oh, well, thank you. I didn't know that. I did bring you a smoothie. And
she's like, is there anything I can do for you? And I'm like, I need food.
I wish I could be there more. If I could clone myself, that would be
right.
Great.
How many times do we all feel like that, right?
But yeah, I had to keep this going. Well,
Yeah.
And I knew you weren't alone, and I always made sure.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. So, but just use like in a matter of minutes, right? And I know you've done the same thing. Like, oh my gosh, I was in the grocery store and this happened, and in a matter of minutes, I was able to process through this stuff. And so understanding, having that communication, right? Let's say I hadn't communicated that desire, that core value, that whatever, right? And then Jen had hung out and held my hand all week. And then we both come back to work the next week and everything's falling apart. And then I'm all upset because everything's falling apart, blah, 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 and all these, right? Yeah. How horrible.
Why didn't you pick it up?
Yeah, how would that have been?
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, because I was so busy holding your freaking hand, So brave conversation, you guys, is so important. And, and I think about like in marriage and, and Dave and I, we've been married for a long time, been through all kinds of stuff, as so many people have. And I would say that the hardest times in our marriage is when we could not have brave conversations.
Yeah.
Right? Or we couldn't have brave conversations that were safe. Yeah. Right? So that's the other thing, is we have to make sure that the other person knows that it's okay for them to feel the way they're feeling. Dave does this all the time. He knows, like, I'm not a really good emoter. I'm not super comfortable with lots of emotions. That's that kind of D part of me, right? And so, but I live in a world and I have emotions. So when they come up, I get really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like, I hate crying. They come up, but I don't want to be so dysfunctional that I don't cry, right? I don't know. And Dave is so good. He'll do it all the time. It's okay, Melissa, to splash. Right?
Yeah.
And there's this whole theory about, the bowl and the water inside of it. And so he makes this bowl, right? This safe space, and says, it's okay to splash. I gotcha. It's okay to splash, right? And so creating that space with the person that you are wanting restoration with, and saying, it's okay to splash. Like, I got this. I'm a safe person. I'm a safe space. You can splash. You can have your emotions. It's okay to be hurt, right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
The other person is like, I gotcha. It's okay to splash. All of your waves and the fluidity of emotions and experience. It's okay. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have that safe space for brave conversation and saying, these were my core values, and this is what I perceived your actions said and did around those core values. Right?
Yeah,
and it might even be, these are my core values. I am so sorry that I never communicated those to you. Like, I can't really hold you accountable to something I didn't communicate, right?
Yeah.
Inferred values don't count.
Right.
Okay. So again, in marriage, I brought it up. Dave and I never had marriage vows. It was inferred that we would not have an intimate relationship with another person. So with that said, right? Define intimate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because in this day and age, with pornography and sexting and all of, these crazy spaces that are developed, right? Intimacy has to be defined. There are more women in emotional pornography relationships than physical ones. Is that a offense of intimacy? Those are things that have to be discussed.
Yeah. That's what I was hearing, was there's probably greater emotional infidelity than, that type of affair, an emotional affair with a coworker, or, exactly.
Right. And those brave conversations, instead of inferring, right? I've heard with Dave and I in marriage ministry back in the day, that was something we heard all the time. Well, I didn't have sex with her. Maybe not physically, but I promise you did in your head. Well, that doesn't count. Oh yeah. Your wife that's over here, devastated, because when you had sex, you actually called out this other girl's name because that fantasy has been going on in your head like a movie reel, right? So it's the brave conversations.
Yeah.
So it's not, you'll never cheat on me. Let's define cheat.
Right.
And that might be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you can't hold somebody accountable to something that was never communicated.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, we'll wrap that up this week. I just really, really felt like we wanted to address the whole issue of betrayal. I think betrayal is keeping so many people out of purpose. It's keeping people in fear. It's keeping people playing small in their life, because they've been betrayed. and they're, it's the response, the fear response is to shrink, to make ourselves small, and to guard. Right. And that's what betrayal will do. It puts us in that fight, flight, fawn. Another conversation we could have for another day, because I want to wrap this up. But our brain responds with fight, flight, or fawn. You guys can look that up, and affects how we then interact with the rest of our life. And I really, truly believe that the key to not having that betrayal, where we're having to actually address internal instability in the construct that we have created around this person, place, or thing, but to then have brave, open conversations from the get-go in your interactions, your experiences with people, so that that construct is built correctly, because we all do it. You can't not create a construct. I guess if it was like 51st dates, that would be a really good example of not being able to create a construct, right? Everything's new every day, all day. I've got somebody in my life I'm experiencing that with right now. Anyway,
watch the video.
So, so I just think that's really important, because we've got big goals, big aspirations, big calls on our life, and I want to see everybody get them fulfilled. So
yeah, so good.
Anything you want to
end
with?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you said, as far as that fear that from being betrayed, it's a wall that's up that keeps you from stepping into who you're called to be. So you nailed it, definitely. And that's our goal, is to see everybody step into their ultimate purpose and hit their convergence and do what they're called to do and what they're created to be. So
yeah. Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys next week.